Thank you all for joining us for this episode of The Courageous Choice. We're thrilled to have Dr. Dave Blake with us today. Dr. Dave is a gig talent consultant who has a really incredible career in human resources that actually started in the military. So thank you for your service, Dave. And also is about to launch his first book. So I'm excited that he's going to be a published author with the book Leading with Grace. And so we're going to explore both his journey and career and a little bit about the book and why he wanted to write this story. So thanks for joining us today, Dave. It's an honor to have you here.
Great, Jamie, and thank you for the invite. I really do appreciate it. Love working with gig talent, so glad to be representing gig as well as on the conversation today. So go gig.
Go
Anyway,
Gig.
yeah, thanks for the kickoff. As you mentioned, my journey did start back in 1979 when I joined the military. I spent 20 years and retired. Did leader development programs for most of that time in the military, about 15 years, worked in the development of leaders, non-commissioned officers that would take on responsibilities all worldwide across the Air Force. And so I began this sort of lifelong fascination with leadership and understanding what made great leaders, because throughout history, leaders have made changes and impacts that many of us simply cannot even imagine. In my book, I talk about people like Martin Luther King and Nelson Mandela, Oprah Winfrey, people that have really made impacts on day-to-day people's lives, and sometimes without even knowing they were doing those. And I found that there are certain elements of that leadership that are true for all leaders. And so, hence why I decided to talk about liberation. That's why I decided to talk about grace. Not in the traditional sense we talk about grace. Somebody told me, are we talking about grace, what we say over the table? And I'm like, no, not necessarily. I'm talking about leading with grace. And after I exited the Air Force, I went into higher education and really got to meet some fantastic leaders. I did some time even in medical device manufacturing. So I saw different styles and approaches. And as I grew, I think closer to my time of retirement, and I think I'm semi-retired. I'm on I always say my second chapter. One of the things that struck me was I think now more, and my minor as a young man was to be a history teacher. So I try to infuse a little bit of history in everything I do. And when I look back across history, I think right now we're in one of the most important junctures in our journey, not only as a nation, but in corporations, large and small, mom and pop, startups, ones that have been around for 100 and some odd years. It doesn't matter. They're all in sort of this mass transition. Part of it brought on by technology, part of it brought on by COVID, part of it, the cultural and value shifts. All these different things are coming to play at the exact same time. My wife says it makes her scared to death. But me, as somebody who's fascinated by leadership, it really means that there are opportunities for people to step up and approach it differently. And since you talk about courage, even today, more than ever, it takes courage to lead. All of us have a job title, right? I don't care who you are. Sometimes I go by grandpa. Sometimes I go by Dave, Dr. Dave. People call me all sorts of different things. All those are great. But that's not the legacy I necessarily want to leave. And as you get older, you think about legacy. What do I want to leave behind that somebody will remember me for? As somebody reminded me one time, nobody talks about how hard you worked at your funeral. They talk about the kind of person you are. And so what I'm interested is in leaders today I think today there are really two styles of leadership out there. There's sort of that command and control, do as I say, you're just a cog in the big wheel. And I'm not advocating for that. Does it have a place at some point? Maybe in some situations. But on the other hand, what I'm advocating for is leading with grace, because people are not cogs in the wheel. People are, I think what I hear from people that I talk to, even CEOs that I coach, is they're exhausted. I was with a group of folks the other day and we were talking about kind of what they're struggling, what they're trying to deal with. And one of the things one of them said was, we're not healthy. Not in the idea that I have a temperature or a cold or the flu, but psychologically, I'm not healthy, right? We're struggling with these things. And even as if we watch the nightly news, I don't suggest we do that a lot. But when we obviously are bombarded by the events of the world around us, I find that it is as a nation, and even to some degree as a business, have really shifted back a little more to the command and control side of the house. And leadership swings like a pendulum, right? Different philosophies, different times, we need different things. But the purpose of my book is to argue that grace is what we need today. And I highlight certain people in the book that I really felt demonstrated some of those very things that really did. I mean, I'll give you one quick example. Nelson Mandela, I've always been fascinated with him, is, he was in prison on Robben Island for decades. A horrible, horrible place. The cell was about 8 by 8. He was denied any access to family members, legal counsel. What was he locked up for? Being courageous, speaking out against something that was just fundamentally wrong, apartheid. But in order to silence his voice, they put him on an island off the coast of South Africa, locked him up, threw away the key. Oddly enough, it didn't stop him from speaking out. Word got out. Over time, apartheid fell and Mandela returned to South Africa. Now, Nelson Mandela is a leader who became ultimately the president of South Africa, really the founder of modern South Africa. He could have took two choices. He could have exacted retribution on the very people that had imprisoned him. They were no longer in power. They were all out of power. So he had a choice. And I'm sure there were voices that said to him, it's time to get even. It's our day to lead. But instead, he took the approach of grace. It's not a mamby-pamby approach to leadership. It's not soft. It's not, oh, those EQ people, they're telling you everything's got to have a hug. That's not what it says. What it says is that if you want to move forward in life and you want to move past the things that bother you or have challenged you, or in this case of Mandela, imprisoned you, one has to learn to let go. And grace is fundamental to that. I'm not saying grace means forget about it. What I'm saying is, if you want to move forward, grace in leadership is key. So
That's so,
fundamentally, that's kind of where I'm at.
yeah, super powerful. I'm really geeking out on kind of this intersection between grace and courage because,
Yeah.
like all the examples you've shown, kind of really require both. And so that's super interesting. I didn't know we shared the history in our undergraduate studies.
Oh, phenomenal.
Yeah,
I'll talk more.
yeah.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
history, political science, but anyway, different conversation, I guess.
That's okay.
So, you have shared with me previously a story about, I think it was one of your first leaders who really taught you about leading with grace. I think his name is Oscar. You want to tell us that story?
Yeah. Yeah. Oscar's a great guy. He's still around too, by the way. So, and before I joined the Air Force, I lived up in Anaheim, California. And of course, what does everybody in Anaheim do? Go to work for Disneyland after they graduate from high school. And I did the same. And my first job was not, people say, oh, were you a character? Did you get right? No, I washed dishes. Not the most glorious job that anybody could ever have. But hey, I was working at Disneyland. So at least I was a dishwasher at Disneyland. And my first boss was a gentleman whose name was Oscar Martinez. Oscar was actually an immigrant from Mexico. He was in charge of the back kitchen. He was the head cook at Carnation Cafe. So if you ever go into Disneyland, it's
Totally
down,
been there.
yeah, about middle down the street on the left.
Yeah.
And Oscar was my boss, and most really unassuming guy, right? He was, really warm, very, very approachable. It was one of my really first jobs I ever had. And so I was just kind of trying to figure out what to do. And today, Oscar, by the way, is still at Disneyland. And we're talking 40 some odd more years ago. Oscar is now the head chef of Disneyland. So
Amazing.
all the chefs work for Oscar. And self-trained, never went to cooking school, never did any of those things. But if you can imagine working in the kitchen at Disneyland, it's crazy, right? It's easy to go to default to a command and control style. Do this, do that, do this, do that.
Yeah, we've
Plus,
all seen the kitchen environments that do that for sure, right?
oh, I mean, look at Gordon Ramsay. I mean, I always say,
Right,
look at
right,
Gordon Ramsay, who's very command and control, right? You're
for
not going to
sure.
serve this, just throw that outburst of energy. No, Oscar was calm, cool, and collected. I don't care if there was 100 tickets hanging up. We just worked through them. And he was constantly asking, everybody okay? Everybody okay? You go take a break. You go take a break. He got to know who our families were. And, so like if my mom and dad would come to the park because, hey, they want to go see their son who works at Disneyland, Oscar would always walk out there and say hi. He just had a different way of interacting with people. He would walk out on the floor and his English wasn't the best, and he was mindful of that. I think it bothered. It's great now, but back then it wasn't. And he would go out and talk to people, just say, "Hi, how you doing? Is everything okay?" That was, kind of an odd thing to do back in those days. It's like, you need to be back there cooking, but that was not Oscar. Oscar really understood the value of respect for people. I mean, more than probably any person I've ever worked for. So when I go to the park every now and then, which I do with my grandkids, I go teach them, or not teach them. I always tell Oscar I'm coming. So he lets me in. And then I give him a chance to meet my grandkids because I want my grandkids to meet my first boss. And I can't think of
That's
a better honor to bestow on Oscar because a lot of times our first bosses, let's face it, might be fast food or retail. It's like, oh, I remember how horrible that was. Fortunately, I think a lot of how I view the world today is a lot of different people, but definitely Oscar Martinez.
I love that story. It's also a reminder to all of us as leaders the impact we have on our teams, regardless of what the job is, regardless of what stage of career. There's a lot of conversation now, really, at both ends of the workforce around how we treat people. And I
Absolutely.
think that I just love the service industry. I also started my career in service, and I think that it teaches some really fundamentals that can stick with you regardless of where you go, So
Yeah,
so
indeed.
kudos to
Hard work.
Oscar and team. Yeah, hard work
Yeah.
and it does start with grace and respect and caring for people and looking for those opportunities. One of the conversations I think you and I have shared a little bit around a lot of organizations that we partner with today are looking for how to um, kind of like uh, bring alive or activate the within people kind of that intention of like looking for those areas of uh, where they can serve basically. When I think about service, I'm sure it's true at Disneyland. If you're walking and you see something on the floor, you pick it up. You're just trained that way, right? If somebody's a hold of you, you hold the door. Like it just is not, it's just natural, right? And those are maybe a little bit more obvious, but we were trying to activate that within organizations today. And I don't know if you weren't kind of trained that way or you don't come with that mindset. I don't know. Have you seen that at all in some of the organizations you're working with?
Yeah, definitely. I think, I'm at the older end of the workforce, right? So I was trained differently with different values about work, how work operates. It doesn't mean my values are any better than anybody, but it does mean that we're going to have to get used to understanding how people's values are going to in place the workforce. I can't say, well, back in my day, we used to do this, right? I mean, it's like
And I
back in
walked a
old,
mile in the snow, but nobody cares.
yeah,
Just
who
kidding.
cares? I
Yeah.
live in California. I don't do that.
Me
But
too.
one of the phrases I talk about a lot, or one of the things I also like to talk about, is this idea of liberation. And so, and I even write a newsletter called The Liberator. What I like to talk about is how do we go into organizations and liberate people? And what that means is, if you think about the word liberate, I mean set free. Not like you don't have to work anymore and everybody gets to go home, but how do I let people become who they're really meant to be, given who they are? Not say you got to follow my little way of doing things. I've learned this with my kids, right? So my kids range in age from 44 to 34. That's a pretty good span, right? And the way they see the world is not the way I see the world. And sometimes my wife goes, "Oh, if they would just," and I know, just think like we get no. And then on the other hand, I try to say, well, let's find out what's great about them and to some degree almost exploit it, right? Find out where we can liberate them so they can be the people they were meant to be. They were not, none of my employees are meant to be me. They're not meant to be anybody else than who they are. And so I think the job for leaders today, how do we find ways to liberate people to become who they are meant to be. And I think if you look at a leadership style, grace is a way to liberate.
I love
Command
that.
command and control does not liberate.
No, and it shuts down, right? And it reinforces, like you've talked about, kind of fear-based environments and things like that. It's interesting. I talk a lot. I just believe everybody's kind of power or strength is really in their authentic selves, and learning to align that. That's kind of like the work as a human to get into that alignment. And I agree with you. From a leadership perspective, it's how do we enable or create a healthy environment. My dad used to use the words like push power, right? It's like pushing power. So, but it's liberating from perceived barriers that maybe people feel like, maybe I shouldn't, am I waiting for instruction from my boss because they're going to tell me what to do? Or do I feel empowered to like create and be part of the solution and drive innovation? And that's what we want to unlock in people. So I think that is a really great way to look at it. When you think back in your career, I'm sure there's been key moments that either took grace and or courage, maybe both. Um, is there anything that stands out to you when you think about that moment when you had to decide to either take a leap or make a decision?
Yeah, I mean, there's probably a lot, when you look back. I honestly think the decision I dreaded most and feared most was retirement. And it's odd. You think, oh, I'm here. I can retire. And this is awesome. Um, I didn't know what I was going to do. And I knew I wanted to do something. I mean, people always say, if you retire and you don't work, you're basically, my wife jokes today that I'm the most busy retired person she knows. But I knew I was transitioning to something totally different and unusual. Like, I don't have to get up every morning and I can wear what I want to wear. And if I don't want to do something today, I don't have to do something today. And, I'm not, maybe the word courage is too strong, but it would have been easy to keep doing what I was doing. Right. I had a great boss. I worked for a phenomenal organization. I loved my boss. She was like the best last boss I could ever have. And, but what I found was I'd get up in the morning, sit on the edge of the bed and go, this isn't any fun anymore. I dreaded having to do the same stuff I'd been doing for 40 years. It was just exhausting me. And while I could do it and collect a paycheck and nobody would be the wiser, I wasn't being honest with myself. And so I would tell people all the time, if you're not happy, go. Find out what's going to make you happy. Whatever that happy is, I don't care. It could be just hanging out with your grandkids. So I made the leap. And the
Thank
first
you
year
for
was not easy. That first year was like, okay, what am I going to do now? It settled down finally. And I think I found a new purpose. My new purpose is to talk about leadership and liberation and talk about grace. This is, sort of my new venture. So, most people say, well, you really can't change direction at your age. I would argue it's now the best time as ever because I am free to do what I want to do.
100%. I mean, so I think that things are totally changing, by the way. I don't know if we haven't had this conversation, but midlife now is defined as 45 to 75.
All
So,
right. I'm in,
you
I'm
know,
in midlife.
you're
Thank
in
you. That's
midlife.
great.
And
Yeah.
and so most people when you've had, what do they say? I think the average career is like 7 different careers that the average person has. So if you think about that time span, of course they're going to do something different. And you have a lot of wisdom and perspective and things that you can share, and you're doing that. So I love seeing that. And thank you for sharing, the courage that does take. And I think it's common. I mean, I'm talking to a lot of friends who are kind of near retirement. They might even be excited about it, but they're also scared. And I think there's like multi-level, right? Obviously, there's financial and just real
Sure.
things. And the idea, I mean, when you've always been an earner to like, oh, I might not make any more money. What does that look like? Um, but there's a huge identity part of that too, right? For
It
many of
is.
us,
Oh,
yeah. I mean, you were CHRO, you're a doctor, you were kind of identified by this success in your career. Have you done work around how do you identify now, I guess is maybe my question.
Dave, I always joke when people say, "Oh, would you like me to call you Dr. Blake?" I said, "No, Dave's fine. Dave's
I
fine."
thought you were going to say train conductor.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, train driver is my other one. I mean, it's funny when every time I leave our current client, which I'm working with you on as well, I see your license plate and it says gratitude. I'm like, oh man, I wish I had gotten that license plate. I mean, that's just like, I mean, you must don't ever let that one go. So yeah, I do. I actually follow my passion. I'm a steam engineer, which some people know about. So I work on an antique railroad. I'm the president of the board there, and so it's such a challenge for me because I'm the least mechanical person you ever want to meet. So I wanted to learn to do something that's totally mechanical. And if you've ever watched an old 100-year-old steam train, it's all mechanics. And so I've really enjoyed it. I've learned from some really great people who have taught me a lost art. And boy, I tell you what, anytime you hang out with kids on a weekend that come ride the train, they're never in a bad mood. Neither are their parents. And so it's kind of my release. I call it my therapy. It's my therapy.
I love that. I
My
love
therapy.
that. Well, you certainly don't sound bored. I mean,
No.
so that question of like, what am I going to do? You've answered it in many ways. What advice would you have for others who might be nearing retirement or thinking about their second act, and so that they can kind of get to that same place of joy and contentment
Yeah.
and, quite frankly,
Yeah.
meaning that I hear in what
Yeah.
you're sharing?
Yeah. I think first of all, don't look at trying to be happy. I think there's a misnomer there. I think happy and joy are two different things. Happy is an immediate, shot of emotion, right? You get happy. 10 minutes later, you're sad. Joy is a sort of a continuous feeling, right? I'm joyful about life. It doesn't mean that you're not going to have cruddy days,
For
but you're
sure.
still joyful. There's a difference in happy and sad, right? There's happy
Yeah,
moments, sad moments. When I talk to people, I said, first of all, don't doubt what you're capable of doing. And I think one of the things I had to get past was, why would anyone want to hire the old guy? Okay, I'm retired. Who's going to care? I'm past my prime. I'm old news. Um, I don't
mm.
think that way. First of all,
Stories
right,
in our head. Yeah,
right. We're constantly replaying these things, and it could be damaging in that sense. I mean, it really is the imposter syndrome, right? It's like,
yeah,
oh, come on, who's going to pay attention to me? Well, there's one thing you have that nobody else has, and that's wisdom. Wisdom comes with time.
yeah,
Sure, you could hire an executive coach who's 35, and that's fine. But they don't have the same wisdom that I might have at my age, right? And so I think sometimes I try to tell people is don't fear it, plan for it. So I knew in 2018 that I wanted to retire in 2024. I knew that. So I began the process of what's that going to look like? No, you can't wake up one morning and go, I'm out. Well, I guess you could if you had money hiding up. But even then, what are you going to do next? A friend of mine said to me, don't call it retirement, call it next chapter. And that's why I talk to people about how are you planning for the next chapter? What are you going to do? And I know it's not, and I work with people who are used to being busy, right? So they're not going to say, I just want to sit home, watch TV. I've never had anyone tell me that. That would be like the best client ever. Okay, great. Get a good cable subscription, set.
here's some bonbons.
Yeah, get some bonbons, get a streaming service, good chair, you're set. Yeah, I'll
Yeah.
send you my bill for my advice.
Glad I could
Right,
help.
right,
Yeah,
right.
no,
So yeah,
it's the whole structure, right? Like, when if you're working, and that's been shifting for people too. We used to wake up and go to the office. Now people may not be going to the office. I might be walking over to this room. But, so the structure shifts. And how do you create a new structure for yourself so you still feel fulfilled and purposeful, and I believe contributing to, society around you, or the communities around you, however you define that. That can
yeah,
be your family, that can be, your literal community locally, that can be your church group or a professional organization. There's so many, and uh, people that are less fortunate. There's so many ways to contribute, and I
yeah,
think that's a part of meaning too.
yeah. Don't limit yourself. That's would be my advice.
I love that. Well, as we think about this, in the audience, there's HR leaders, and there's just business leaders in general. Um, what's maybe the three takeaways that you'd like to leave leaders with as
Mm,
they
that's a good
listen
one.
to us today?
First of all, I'll go back to the word liberate now. I think one of the greatest things any person could do as a leader is set your people free. Encourage them to innovate, encourage them to think on their own, encourage them to make decisions, challenge them. What would you do? What would you think? How would you approach it? Sometimes we default to, let me tell you how to do it. And that's easy. It's quick. It's simple. It's fast. Gets things done. And they do exactly what you want them to do. On the other hand, there might be 90 different ways to figure it out. So liberate your people, I think, number one. I think number two, recognize that these are human beings that are working for you. I know it sounds crazy. I mean, obviously they're human beings. Well, then treat them that way. Make sure you understand that there are days when people need a break. I think now more than ever. One of the clients I have right now has 50% of the staff that they had at the beginning of the year. The work hasn't changed. And so to sit there and think that you're going to keep up with that is crazy. So take time. And this is the grace element, right? Take time to listen to what people are struggling with. Don't spend the only time you're talking to your employees. Don't make it only just about work. Ask the simple question, how are you doing? And don't wait for them to come to your office, go to theirs. So that's two things. I'd liberate, and then I think grant your people greater grace. And finally, I think most important, and something I did not do, and I'm going to venture to say you didn't do it either. We don't take care of ourselves, right? We work
I don't know what you're
ourselves.
talking about.
Yeah, no, I was like, well, there's all this. I'm just like, okay, I got great advice. I hope I could do it. But I've learned that as you get older, your doctor reminds you of all the things that, okay, all right. So take time to pause. If you need to take a day off just to go sit at the beach and stare at the water, then I encourage you to take time off, stare at the beach, and go to the water. I've had people who work for me that would not take vacation. They was like, oh no, I would just tell them, you're on vacation tomorrow. Don't come into this office and don't let me see you log in. You have to set the tone. You have to set the tone. So,
I'm going to tell myself that Dr. Dave gave me permission, and
yes, I'm granting you a day off. I mean, for whatever it's worth, you got it. I'll write you the check.
That's amazing. Well, I definitely need to have you back in that case. I think you honestly, what you're talking about is so relevant today and so needed. And I'm really excited. When does the book come out?
Monday morning on Amazon.
Monday morning on Amazon. So this is going to air after it's come out. So you'll be able to find the book Leading with Grace on Amazon. And Dave, if people want to reach out to you, how can they find you?
I'm going to give you Dr. Dave Blake. That's the easy part at buildingforwardnow.com. That's my business email. And would love to hear from you and get your thoughts and continue our conversation.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us today, Dave. It's always a pleasure to be with you. And now we have so many more things to talk about next time we see each other.
We do. Thank you, Jamie. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you for listening to The Courageous Choice. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a 5-star review to help get the word out about the podcast. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on any of our future conversations. If you'd like to know more about gig talent, please visit gigtalentagency.com or email us at podcast@gigtalentagency.com. See you in the next episode.